G'day, welcome to New Game Plus. Cringe here, and we've got a great show coming up for you this week. Meg has a chat with Alex Blaikie, who is part of ESL Australia. They're responsible for a lot of esports content that you might see on Twitch. He speaks about how he got into the industry through game dev, through LAN parties over in Western Australia, so that's coming up. Don, Jamie, and Kart also talk Project Cars 3, which you might want to think twice about getting if you were really into Project Cars 1 and 2. Project Cars 3 does the simcade, that's the term. It's like a simulation arcade mix, really rough. It's not quite what you'd expect if you were like, oh, okay, cool, it's just going to be more of Project Cars. Not quite. So stick around for that review coming up. But first, in the gaming news this week, we are jumping straight into the PlayStation 5 announcements from Sony around the PS5 price, release date, the games, the services, all of that. Let's get into that discussion now. PlayStation had an announcement stream where they ran down the release date, the price of both the disc and discless version of the console. The PS5 disc-based one will be $749 in Australia, and the discless will be $599. It's releasing on November 12th, and as of recording, it looks like pretty much all of those pre-orders for launch day have already been sold out.
Yeah.
With that announcement, we also got trailers for Final Fantasy 16, which looks like a weird mix of Final Fantasy 14 and 15, actually. We'll get into that in a sec. God of War Ragnarok, which is looks to be a direct sequel to the God of War reboot that took place, that was released a few years ago. We also got Hogwarts Legacy, the PlayStation Plus collection, Spider-Man, Miles Morales, and Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition. There are a lot of announcements that were part of this live stream. Reading the room, we fully expected the PlayStation 5 to be well above what the Xbox Series X and I mean, obviously the Series S. The one that I was really frustrated by, and I believe, Don, you and I spoke about this in the Discord a few weeks ago, was like, they're not going to charge $150 for a disc drive. They wouldn't do that. Oh, they did that. It was $600 for the discless and $750 for the disc one. And
see, like, this is me putting my conspiracy theorist's hat on, but like, I think they totally were. They weren't going to charge $150 for the disc full edition. Rather, there was only going to be like at most a $100 difference between the two. But then Microsoft had to offer their the Xbox Series S for $500.
Yeah.
So, and like to be $150 more expensive than the competitor, it just doesn't make any, like, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot. So I like, as much as Sony has said, I believe, that the prices that were long decided, I do think there's a little bit of reacting going on here.
Have to be.
And besides, let's face it, in the long run, I'm surprised Sony isn't taking an even bigger bath than the all digital edition, because any losses they make on the console side, and let's face it, console makers have always traditionally made a loss on the box itself, they would more than make up for it in the digital sales in the PlayStation Network store, because, well, they get all the profit margin.
Absolutely.
there.
And
I think they tried to get away with as much as they could as well. I mean, granted, we all think that, roughly how much is it for a Blu-ray drive nowadays? Very different to that of during the PS3 and PS4 era. But I think a lot of people also haven't realized that the disc drive that they're using is Ultra HD. So that allows for, for bigger blow-ups of 8K media once it becomes available. On the other hand, this is all proprietary hardware and stuff like that Sony has. I mean, this isn't the first time that they've done this. That when they're touting about their proprietary stuff that they're using, hardware and things like that. You only have to go and look back into history with the PSP, the PS Vita, with all their memory stick stuff. Even if it's all done in-house, like, nothing's stopping them from charging $200 for a fucking memory card. So
yeah, I do not look forward to seeing how much it's going to cost for storage on this thing, because
actually that's not too bad, because you can put in use your own M2 SSDs. But
isn't that also specific M2 drives, or is it
ones that meet a specific spec that they have a transfer rate of, I believe it's 5.5 gigabytes per second, which is a lot of gigabytes per second.
By the time that you do need it, though, I think the prices will go down.
Yeah.
You find that storage in that regard, as long as it's not a proprietary kind of type of speed or makeup, you'll find that probably by the time you do need to usher in an external hard drive, about a year or two from now, it's probably going to get to a point where it's like, it's actually relatively nicely priced. just in the same way, you know, like SATA SSDs were, where you could just take out the factory one and then pop in like a 1-2 terabyte one. It'll go down in price very quickly, a lot quicker than most people think.
Let's hope so, because I don't know. I think if I don't know how much storage is actually in the PS5, there's a big old fact somewhere that actually explains it. So
25 gig or something. Almost 1 terabyte.
Terabyte minus the 150 gigs worth of storage and etc. Call of Duty will, and that's the thing. Like, yeah, you're gonna need that because 850 gigs is still a lot, but that's 3 Call of Duties right there, and that's not including all the patches every time they need to change one of the bristles in Captain Price's mustache.
Yeah, I mean, like Call of Duty actually has its own partition on that hard drive, so no matter how many times you format it, it's not going to get touched.
That's what the C. No, that's what the C drive. That's COD drive.
COD drive, yeah.
Yeah, of course. If you're watching us on TV, stick around. We've got Meg's interview coming up in just a sec.
Hey guys, it's Megs here on New Game Plus with another interview series about what people in the local Australian video games industry are doing on a massive scale to make a huge difference within the scene in Australia on a local level. And with me today, I have Alex Blaikie. He is a PR and social media manager for ESL Australia, which is exciting because it's the world's largest esports organization, as a lot of you out there would definitely know if you're big fans of esports and gaming, as we all are. But essentially, ESL hosts tournaments throughout Australia and New Zealand for major publishers like Blizzard, Nintendo, Riot, Valve, Microsoft, and many more. And I'm really excited to pick Alex's brain about how he got to where he is today, and I guess what ESL Australia are doing during these crazy times in COVID. So welcome to the show, Alex. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Megs. Great to be on here, of course. And hopefully I can, share a little bit about esports and esports in Australia that people may not know.
Where did your love of gaming begin, Alex? I mean, you're based in WA. You've been to the old RF lands, the classic lands back in the day. And a word on the street is you're a big league player.
Oh, back in the day, let me tell you, Megs, I was the second best AD carry in WA when I played professionally. And no, it has been a while. I used to play a league. That's kind of how I got into esports, right?
Yeah, right.
Just got a few mates together from essentially just the league forums, and we decided to form a team. We decided to go down to RF LAN, which, like you said, massive LAN here in WA, over 500 people, just such a big event here, and just started competing in RF LAN and then some online tournaments, and effectively got into esports that way. And since then, I've been getting into game development after that, and more different kind of areas in the esports field. So that's basically where it all started.
I love that. So did you study game dev at uni or anything like that? And is that where it sort of stemmed from, your passion for playing the games?
I did study computer science for a little bit at university, but then I made the perhaps questionable decision to drop that and then just make a game and start a full-time solo game dev studio. So that was a big decision for me, but it ended up working out pretty well in the end. Actually developed the first Battle Royale game on Steam. And
all right, let's name drop it. What's the name of the Battle Royale game? Let's do it.
It is, okay, it's down to 1. Yep. 42 players, only 1 will survive. So definitely check it out if you want a Battle Royale game that may not have too many players.
Yeah, there's a T's and C's. Maybe there won't be too many people on that server anymore. But do you reckon that like solo studio kind of set you up for like the skills you needed today at ESL Australia? Like, I mean, obviously you've had there's a couple of steps in between and we're skipping over, but what were the skills you learned at doing game dev that took you here?
Yeah, I mean, you honestly learn so much releasing your own game on Steam or Google Play or wherever you decide to release it. It is just such a big journey because a lot of people think, being a game dev is just purely about, or being a solo game dev is just about, writing code and maybe making some models. But what you actually learn is that you will spend like over half of your time just with the admin stuff, just, when it comes to launch, putting together assets for trailers, writing press releases, setting store prices, all this stuff that it's certainly not something that is front of mind when you go into it. But thankfully, when I did that, I managed to pick up all of that, and it went fairly well to launch, and I've kind of carried a lot of those skills through to my job today in ESL, and still utilize a lot of that kind of knowledge that I built up when just releasing my game and doing most of the stuff. Myself here in my room.
That's the best. And so what do you do at ESL Australia on a day-to-day level? I mean, it sounds like from what we've been chatting about offline is that you're a massive jack of all trades. So using all the skills you've learned about all those different things from indie game dev, how does that translate now?
Yeah, well, I am mainly involved. I try and be mainly involved when I can, just around the PR and social media kind of aspect of our business here in Australia. So,
cool.
That involves writing a lot of press releases, making lots of social media assets and copy, that sort of thing, scheduling it in for all channels. And when we have a big event like IEM or MEO or something, that's where I get to be really creative and step into the marketing side as well.
Yeah.
And maybe come up with trailers or, contact VoiceOver Pete to, get him to make a funny trailer for us, something like that.
VoiceOver Pete.
Oh, exactly. VoiceOver Pete. He did so well. He was our biggest performing post last year. And, he cost $100 to do the voiceover, which was just great.
What a bargain. Yeah.
Exactly. And, with the IEM crowd, honestly, that's where I think my job is probably the most fun, because we get to really have some fun and have some banter with the Counter-Strike community here. Last year we put a giant picture of Dick Stacey on a bus, the longest bus we could find. Yeah, a few people loved that. Reddit noticed at least. So
man, Reddit get around it, don't they, for sure. Now, Alex, you sound like you have a bit of a voiceover voice as well. What does that even mean? I don't even know. But have you done... Surely you've done some yourself.
I have done a little bit myself, now that you bring it up, actually, Meg. So not a great deal, but for our Marvel Super War program that we've recently launched, I've ended up doing the voiceover for our hero spotlights.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's been pretty cool, kind of, telling everyone how to play Hulk. But before that, I guess where it stems from is that I used to commentate, and that's how I started at ESL. Before I was doing PR and social media, I actually... one night, Nick Vanzetti, my now boss or now head of ESL Asia Pacific Japan, just hit me up on Skype, and Nick was like, "Hey Alex, you want to come to Sydney, work for ESL and as a World of Tanks commentator?"
Nice.
Like, sure, Nick, why not? So that's kind of how I got started in commentating, and I guess using my voice a little bit for the job. So carried a little bit of that through.
I love that. So you knew Nick from other games and other, just being in the scene, and it's who you know, isn't it, sometimes?
It definitely is who you know. I think, Nick I knew from him having run ACL events. He invited me to one ACL event to kind of help out with one of those.
Yeah.
And, I didn't know him super well, but he was very well connected in the scene, and lots of those people who used to be at the ACL events are actually full-time staff at ESL today. So at the end of the day, the esports scene, I guess, in Australia, it's quite small. Everyone does know everyone.
Where do you see yourself heading, Alex? And where can people follow your progress, like in your career and beyond?
Yeah, well, where I see myself heading, I think that's something which, honestly, the whole working in esports, it's such a fast-paced industry that I honestly rarely have time to think too many years ahead about where I'm going to be.
I totally understand that. Definitely. It was a loaded question as well. I'm sorry about that.
No, absolutely. But I should,
Yeah.
I think it would be really cool if I could go overseas. I would love to do, I would love to help out with our global team's PR department or marketing department for a global event. Whenever they may start occurring again in the future. It'd be great to head over and see IEM Katowice or ESL One Cologne, one of our events like that, and maybe work overseas for a little bit if I had to, pick a goal within esports.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, for now, definitely stuck within Australia, within WA, in fact. But not complaining about that.
Oh, traveling just feels so out of the league now. Like, it's so unattainable, and who even knows when that's going to be safe again. But I think, a plan like that in the future is definitely a really great way to set your sights and to push yourself to get to that next level. But it sounds like ESL Australia has already gotten you there, and you've got 1,000 things to work on that will help you upskill in all the incredible different little cohorts that esports delivers. So yeah, thank you for letting me pick your brain, Alex, and sharing the knowledge of what it's like working within ESL Australia and what you're working on currently with Marvel's Super War. So thank you incredibly, and all the best.
All the best, Megs. Thank you very much. It's been a fun little interview.
Cheers.
You're hanging out with us here on New Game Plus TV live on Twitch. You might be watching us on C31, C44, or as a podcast. My name's Cringe. I'm here with Jamie, Don, and Kart. And all three of you have been playing Project Cars 3, which to my understanding has previously been more of a simulation style game.
No, yes. When what's called Project Cars was formed out of this Kickstarter campaign, if memory serves me right, and back then they the pitch then was that Project Cars is a community funded simulator game. We'll try to simulate all sorts of cars as realistically as possible. Project Cars 2 continue that legacy. Project Cars 3 has changed things significantly. They decide, I'm not sure what the motive is, but Project Cars 3, despite being the third installation of the Project Cars franchise, is not a simulator. It is much more of an arcade game, more inspired by the likes of Need for Speed Shift or Forza than the original vision of Project Cars. So I'll just say this right off the bat. This is not a Project Cars game. To be honest, I don't think the game quite knows what it wants to be, because let's just take it on face value. Let's take it as an arcade game, except it doesn't have the tenets or the accessibility of a standard of an arcade game. Like the physics, they still feel particularly they still don't provide enough grip for you to really hoon around the corners. Like you need to break in, ease in, and then go hard out. You have to hit your lines as if it's a sim racer. And then there's the presentation, which is sterile like a Forza Motorsport or a Gran Turismo. That doesn't have the pizzazz of a Grid or a Dirt or any of the other Codemasters games, really. Not to mention, it's kind of really punishing for an aspiring casual arcade racer as well. Like there is one particular mode called Pace Sitter, where you're supposed to do 3 laps of a particular circuit, and try and beat the average time. However, if you slip up once, it invalidates your entire progress. So say you're doing like a 2.5 minute lap around one of the courses. You're doing well, you're doing fine. You kind of lose concentration by minute 7. You kind of slide into the wall in a little bit. Bap! And lap invalidated. Your entire progress is in the bin. Sorry, try again.
Yeah, I'll interrupt very quickly to say that is probably being when I restart racing games, it's always because, I missed the corner, or, I got rammed off the track or something. The amount of times I've had to restart an entire race because, you just went off the track your lap's invalidated. By the way, there are modes in this game where you have to do a hot lap, so you only do 1 lap. So imagine you just happen to miss a corner, and you miss it, you get your lap invalidated. Oh, by the way, the game isn't at the end. You have to finish the race. I'm like, no, you just lost. Why bother racing at that point? It's like,
for the joy of racing and for the experience.
A lot of those additions that they've retained from the first and second game of your lap invalidating if you go off the road, cut a corner, or slam into a wall, for example. Instead of giving you a time penalty for it, it'll just straight up invalidate the lap. And again, it's really bad as well because the way the career progression works, which has been overhauled completely and mostly for the worse, is that every single race that you're in, you're not doing the usual race weekend rigmarole of doing your practice, your qualifying, and your race heats. But instead, you're running through heats of 2 laps where you start right at the end and you have to go through this clown car procedure of passing this massive cluster of 16 cars at once, where a lot of the issue isn't like there's no way you can take the racing line properly. There's no way you can duel against the person in front of you or behind you, like in a traditional racing context. It's just basically a free for all. And if you're in like a track like with a really narrow straights like Mount Panorama, for example, it is nigh impossible to pass 20 cars within the space of like a lap and a half. It's just weird. It just feels like kind of here's the Forza style progression. But we're going to retain a lot of the stuff from the second and the first game that definitely is a lot friendlier from a sim perspective. And yeah, it just doesn't feel like it gels as well as it should with some of the other games, or at least some of the other contemporaries, like Gran Turismo, for example.
Yeah, like those, like Gran Turismo has a very specific vision of what it wants to be. Forza has forged its path, and even splintered off where it needs to with Forza Horizon. This game, it does not know what it wants to be. Like it's still like it wants to be Need for Speed Shift, but it can't get rid of its sim roots as much as it wants to. I think like there's kind of like one very specific example that I tripped on, which kind of paints this best, is the game's idea of trying to teach you the racing line. It does not have a racing line as is conventional, like the Forza series or even Gran Turismo or even the other Codemasters games like Grid or F1 2020. Instead, the game gives you, on the default UI anyway, it gives you 3 points for you to try and hit in a corner: the braking point, the apex, and the exit of the corner. Except this is a gross simplification of how to take a corner. Like even for a corner where you're supposed to maybe just lift for like a half second before going back into the corner, it just gives you a raw dog brake button. And even then, the placement of these points, particularly of the braking point, is wildly inaccurate. It's usually like too conservative, so that by the time you actually get to the apex, you're like half to a third of the speed that you want to be. Yet despite that, as long as you hit those 3 points, you get a perfect corner indication, and they are rewarded with a PPM as experience as well.
Yeah, that's one of the major things I wanted to bring up as well, was with the breaking point system, kudos for them for trying to simplify it, but there are far better ways of trying to simplify that, in the sense that they basically give you a bunch of floating PNGs that just show you where you need to be when you enter a corner, where you brake, and where you exit a corner. But it doesn't factor into the account of, what the suggested gear should be, like in Gran Turismo, for example. And it seems a bit too universal across the board. So you can have certain corners in Bathurst. Like, for example, Sector 2 in Bathurst is like where all the action happens, and you're constantly braking and accelerating. And a lot of the corners aren't particularly as conventional as you'd think, like a hairpin, for example. But the way that they're set up, like, it depends on the track as well. I found that some of the racing points in Bathurst and Nordschleife, for example, to be absolutely horrible, to the point where I just switched off all assists, because it actually made me a worse driver than if I just had them switched off completely. Compared to other games, like F1 2020, for example, the racing lines and points and like assists are actually really good and helpful in that. And the visual design is a lot better too.
There's a slight difference in the way that the Formula E cars handled. Also, there are Formula E cars in this game. Shout out to Formula E. But other than that, there is no, maybe there's a slight difference between the front wheel drive and a rear wheel drive, but it was kind of moot because it kind of just felt heavy and kludgy. It didn't feel like, I didn't get the white knuckled satisfaction of perfecting a corner like with previous Project Cars game, nor did I feel the fun hoony happy time of, say, like a Forza Horizon. Yeah, it is exactly. It's a game that's sort of just in between worlds. It tries to be the jack of all trades, but as the saying goes, it is the master of none.
So Project Cars 3 is out now on which systems? I forgot.
PS4, Xbox One, and PC.
The big three. Play it.
It's probably on Stadia. I don't know.
Oh yeah, but who cares about Stadia?
I don't even think Google knows if it's on Stadia or not.
Oh, we have a service. That's right.
Like Stadia. I don't know. Ask Bing about that.
Ooh. Cool. That was our Project Cars 3 review. Thank you so much for that, guys. And thank you, everyone at home, for hanging out with us on Twitch, 8 p.m., usually when the show's running on time. Thursday nights, twitch.tv/NewGamePlusTV is where you can catch the show live. On social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, at New Game Plus TV. The website is newgameplus.tv. And on YouTube, you can actually check out the full interview with Alex Blaikie, youtube.com/New Game Plus TV. That should be going up shortly after the Twitch live stream as well. But that's pretty much all we got for this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time.